Hey everybody, how's it going? This is Andrew McFadyen-Ketchum. I've started over because I started to say my name and I literally flubbed up my own name, and I've had this name for 39 years starting today. I turned 39 yesterday, so it's I was going to say first, but I guess it's my second day? Is, how does that work? Anyway, it's my first or second day of 39, and here in Corona Land. And I'm also recovering from strep throat, which is really bizarre because it's almost impossible to get strep throat right now because I've been in isolation since the NBA shut down and I've been around almost no one. And there are very few cases of strep throat in the country, and you get it the exact same way you get COVID-19, like literally the exact same way. So somehow I managed to get strep throat of all things. So I'm thankful that that's what I got. It was a little scary there because I thought I had COVID for a couple days, but I don't. So yay. So I'm on day 12 of reading from Visiting Hours, my second book, which came out on March 12th. And I was going to read it every day, a poem a day, but of course I got so sick. I got so sick that I could barely talk. It was crazy how swollen I was. So it was like I said, it was scary. Anyway, enough about that. So I'm on day 12. I'm going to read Ice, which is probably the weirdest. Well, one of the weirder poems. It's long, so hang on to your butts. It has parentheticals, asides, so it'd be an interesting poem to read out loud. I don't know that I've ever actually read this poem out loud to anyone. I'll include pictures at the in the post so you can read it. It might be a little easier to see it. And as always, if you're interested in purchasing a copy of Visiting Hours, there's a link to do so. I'll wash my hands really well. I'll sign it. I'll give you a moon button. And I hope everybody out there is doing the very best they can in this very difficult time. This is Ice. I suppose he's forgotten that winter ice descended on our fair county. For 3 weeks, a wintry mix of hail and sleet and ice rain muting the boom of big rigs and tankers that rattled past his bedroom window. 18 days of sub-teen temperatures and the solenoid click of dead car batteries. 360 hours of softball-sized hail and cumulonimbus making hush the rush of commuters who dreamed their ways home to the Whites Creeks and Mount Juliets that satellite our border. A near month of snow days and bleak sky transformed the Nashville International Airport into a roosting place for downed birds. The waterfront's cluster of courthouses and honky-tonks gone dark. It's all still there. The bypass, his bedroom, Mr. Fort's tithing of scrap heap Fords sunk to their lug nuts in the subsoil, the 30-year elm still the monolith of his backyard. Everything but the ice that turned to slush when the cold fronts thinned and thunderheads broke apart into countless waxen rags. And Nashville, our hometown, Music City, the city of our conception, the city of our births, became a mud-sucked wallow. A slurry of slush and downed alders and hawthorns clogging the city's subsystem of storm drains and catch basins. The water tables rising as raw sewage gurgled up the galvanized service lines and basement drains, flock after flock of stunned starlings aswirl in the eddies of the water main to short out the sump pumps. The tributaries and feeders slogged with debris, gutters sagging with the weight of thaw from their eaves. That storm took 8 lives, and it fooled us, the sun, when the storm clouds scalloped and thinned at midday, and that fiery icon appeared to ignite all the ice-licked water towers and steeples on the hills, and we think, perhaps, this is it. Perhaps this is the end of all this windburn and slant hail. Perhaps these inky nebulae will finally lift like lids from the firmamented world, and we will be free again. Only to watch the ice briefly thaw, only to watch the ice fold back over onto itself and freeze yet again like the process of the refinement of good steel, the sun's rays burnishing all the more impassable with its dry rag and spittoon, with its too few plows and nowhere near enough salt, Nashville's jumbled grid of surface roads and arterials, the high-rises and honky-tonks and high-end hotels shuttered without power on the western edge of the waterfront. Home, milk-glassed metropolis, capital city so proudly brandishing your inked star, how could he forget all the hardwoods ice took down? American beech and persimmon, hardstone olives and river birch, smooth-chunked hornbeams and spiny-barked honey locust. What of the green ash whose winged fruits once spun down in thick layers beneath spring's scarred elliptic? What of the sycamores who once gazed upon themselves in the purling channels of the Cumberland, and who sighed when ice felled them, antheming woeful narratives like paper-lipped oracles as they drifted downriver, their snapped limbs the teeth of a death machine, their snapped limbs churning the bottleneck's rapids. Mrs. Fort's prize Chinaberry was the first on his street to fail, a mere 3 days of ice when its taproot must have snapped, and it swooned into the arms of Harvey Tanker's dual wych elms, and was held there half the night like a bride, like a mistress, like a concubine, until the wych elms creaked and groaned and called out into the night as they collapsed into a hunchbacked sweet gum, which, like allied Slavic nationhoods, like a domino set aside another domino, toppled too, and he was shaken awake with the reverb of thunder and the crashing of dry bones and a shudder in his bedroom walls when his father burst through the door and pulled him from bed, dragged him by the collar down the stairs to the basement where his mother and sister huddled beneath a workbench, their faces flashing in and out of the dark until the power finally failed. Failures spread well beyond the county line that night, and word of mouth spread in our dreams. And with it, panic spread wide its millipede arms to embrace the many children of God who made their way to panic in their sleep. And with panic, the wolf moon clicked open. At first, no more than a pinpoint of light, then rippling outward like the widening aperture of an eye until, pale as an orb weaver, pale as an artifact archived in a box in a warehouse of larger boxes, it beamed in the clear sky, only clear when full dark rose, where it hung and was howled to and was worshipped. Wolf Moon, who snoozed all day beneath the folding banquet tables of the relief tent stocked with the candles and canned goods our mayor would hang his re-election on. Wolf Moon, who growled from his manged coat, spit cankered in tiny white grins about his muzzle, tail lopped off, testicles swinging between his haunches like a hangman's noose. Wolfman who stepped into the street in front of his father in the guise of two men knuckling tire irons. Wolf Moon whose teeth gleamed dully in the cheap Chinese-made steel of tire irons held in a fist. Wolf Moon who woke him before sunrise, the night of felled trees, his crazed eye like a looter's flashlight through the basement windows, the haze cord of his fogged breath drawing him down the hall as my family slept on the floor, as I drew pinwheels in the plumes of their haze breath that hung in the cold, as I watched the pinwheels spiral like Pharisees in the gloom. And when he found himself crawling through the broken glass of his back door, he found himself climbing into the limbs of trees, the branches brittle as glass, brittle as jawbones dug up in the yard, brittle as chert, and when they broke in his hands, I wore no gloves, I wore no coat. He spread his arms to fall and was held suspended there, bobbing in the dark in the limbs of fallen trees. And when his hand fell upon a nest of dead possum, his scream echoed as though he were in a chamber. And when his hands fell upon a frozen cardinal, he cupped that little avian in his palms and blew into the space between thumbs like a whistle until he felt it twitch and unfurl, its heart firing up like a V-twin in my hands, its lungs catching fistfuls of air like a set of pistons, until he opened his hands and it burst forth from his palms and he rose with it. And we circled my backyard, we circled my father's crushed moped, we circled the ice-entombed steeple across the street, and the circle widened as we circled, until he found himself, 3 years in the future, on his bike, speeding down Charlotte Ave toward Pearl Cone High, backpack slung across his shoulder, wind cutting across his scalp as he passed his parents' bank and passed through the graffitied throat to the underpass to weave the maze of affordable housing, their foundations cracking like pop rocks and soda, toy drums and carriages and deflated footballs left out in the mud yards. And he circled the alleys between houses where garbage men fed refuse into the government blue mouths of trash trucks, and he watched himself, an eighth grader, making his way to the abandoned quarry on the eve of his teens, and I watched myself stand on its edge in the total dark, and I couldn't breathe for those seconds that seemed like hours as I watched myself step off the quarry's edge into the void. And it seemed like days until I heard myself splash down in the bilge water as we circled, and I feared for my life as the cardinal grew impatient as we circled, as I waited for the sound of my sputtering to the surface and swimming slowly back to shore as we circled, and he circled the pea gravel roof of Bass Junior High and saw Letitia Moore pull him, not yet 12 to her, beneath the eastern stare to teach him to French kiss, as his mother checked her watch in the parking lot as she listened to NPR, waiting yet again to pick up her son from basketball practice, and he saw himself in a circle of classmates, as he circled with Larry Hendricks, the white kid whose clothes were never washed, the white kid who the black kids called white trash, just days before the summer between 6th and 7th grade, the circle calling as we circled, for one of them to throw the first punch as I whispered to him, "You don't have to do this," the circle crying out for them to stop being pussies, to fight, and he circled as we circled the storm drain's mouth and found himself, barely 10, wriggling through its narrow slot to navigate by flashlights. Its drain pipes and intakes were white girls, it was said, by white boys, were said to come here with black boys to fuck in the dark as I circled. O city, O little nation, O small market of selective memory and quarterback controversies, how long it took for the I-65 to reopen, how long it took for the salt trucks on loan from Louisville and Cincinnati to clear your beloved network of highways and surface roads depends on who you ask. 3 weeks of no TV, no Dallas reruns on the boob tube, no McNeil Lair on the squawk box, no artificial heat for 18 days. 360 hours of D-cell radios and canned beans. 432,000 seconds of hunger. Ask Robert Leidick, the fat kid on my block who failed the 5th grade and whose mom stashed the stack of Playboys we plundered beneath her S10's bucket seat, and he'll swear we couldn't play Donkey Kong all winter. Inquire of the forts next door, the good Catholics who built the home I slept in, the good Samaritans who spent their Saturdays at the St. Mary's shelter and scolded me for emulating Magic Johnson's skyhook. You know why, they replied when I asked why, and they'll tell you the church held services by candlelight in the gymnasium well over a month. Speak to his father, and he'll tell you they heated their bedrooms by pump stove for no less than 2 weeks. Talk to his mother, and she'll thumb through her calendar to discover the school year was extended well into June. Look it up, and history will claim the storm lasted all of 3 days. No declaration of natural disaster, no rattle of John Deere generators, no bug zapper buzz of arc lights illuminating the relief tents, no wolf moon or looters howling through hoarfrost. Sometimes, when silence falls like the silence all that ice brought with it, he wonders if it ever ended. The bypass closed down, the absence of limbs for the wind to cut through. More than once, he's woken to the echo of the scrape of plows finally clearing the streets in his ears, though the chuck and growl of the window unit, those sunlight and slaps through the Venetian blinds inform him it's any season but winter. Sometimes he swears he can hear his mother and father still arguing about the Clintons in the kitchen, a thin crease of strained light seeping beneath his bedroom door. The storm was 17 years ago, I must say before rising. In 8 years, I remind you, The girl you've always loved will climb to the roof of one of Nashville's buildings and vanish. They'll say I jumped. They'll say Mary is dead. Some will draw pictures of my body crippled on the sidewalk. Some will take photos of me there, only to burn the negatives. You'll never see Mary again, they'll say. You must learn to forgive yourself. 7 years after that, my love. 7 years after that, dear city in which we both were born. Don't say I didn't warn you. 7 years after that, stunned abattoir of failed altos and flaming guitar picks, rubbing the cold out of my arms, gazing across your alleys and trash bins and smokestacks from this rooftop as I blink in the bright lights of the 21st century. 7 years after that, the floods will come. The floods will come. The floods will come.